Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the holographic display, her heart racing as she prepared to show Earth's entertainment media to the alien delegation. The Galactic Council representatives, with their crystalline bodies and flowing light patterns, sat in perfect stillness, their attention focused entirely on her presentation. "And this," she said, pulling up a classic superhero film, "is what we call entertainment. Stories we create for enjoyment and cultural expression." The aliens' crystalline forms flickered with intense patterns of light, their equivalent of excited murmuring. The lead diplomat, who had introduced himself as Nexus 9, leaned forward. "These beings in your entertainment, they perform impossible feats, flying, manipulating energy, communicating across vast distances with their minds. You create such specific demonstrations of power merely for entertainment." Sarah nodded, though something in Nexus 9's tone made her pause. "We have a long history of storytelling. From ancient myths to modern media, humans have always loved imagining what we could be capable of if we weren't limited by physics and biology." One of the smaller crystalline beings, Zix 427, moved closer to the display. Their light patterns pulsed in what Sarah's xenolinguistic training suggested was intense interest. "And these myths, stories of gods and heroes with extraordinary abilities, they predate your modern entertainment by thousands of years," Sarah confirmed. "Every human culture has them. Stories of people with incredible strength, the ability to control weather, to speak to stars." She broke off as every alien in the room suddenly flashed bright patterns of light at each other. Nexus 9's voice carried an undertone she couldn't quite interpret. "And humans believe these are all fictional, created purely from imagination." "Of course," Sarah laughed. "Though some people used to believe the myths were real, we now understand they're just stories, ways of explaining natural phenomena or teaching moral lessons." She noticed Zix 427 moving around the room, passing close to each human present. There was something odd about their movement pattern, but she couldn't quite place what was bothering her. The demonstration continued for hours. The aliens requested copies of everything: movies, books, comics, video games, ancient mythological texts. Their interest seemed to grow more intense with each story they encountered. As the session wound down, Sarah noticed Zix 427 performing what looked like a scanning motion near the human security detail. Before she could focus on it, Nexus 9 approached her. "Dr. Chen, we find ourselves fascinated by humanity's creative output. The Galactic Council requests complete access to all human entertainment media, from your earliest myths to your most recent creations. For cultural exchange purposes, of course." Sarah felt a flutter of pride. Their first major diplomatic interaction, and the aliens were already impressed by human creativity. "I'll make sure you get everything. Though I have to warn you, we have a lot of content. Humans love telling stories." Nexus 9's crystalline form dimmed slightly. "Yes, stories." They paused. "Tell me, Dr. Chen, have you ever experienced dreams where you could perform these fictional abilities?" The question caught her off guard. "Well, yes, actually. I used to have recurring dreams about talking to stars. Silly childhood things." She laughed, but Nexus 9 didn't join in. "Fascinating. And in these dreams, did the stars respond?" Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had never told anyone, but in those dreams, the stars had sung back to her in a language she almost understood. "I don't see how that's relevant to our cultural exchange," she said carefully. Nexus 9's form brightened again. "Of course, merely scientific curiosity. We look forward to examining your species' imagination." As the delegation prepared to leave, Sarah noticed Zix 427 lingering near the security team again. This time, she caught sight of what looked like a sampling device in their crystalline matrix. They were taking genetic samples. Before she could react, the aliens had departed, leaving her alone in the presentation room. Sarah stood there, suddenly remembering her dream from the night before, the one where she had been writing in a script she had never seen, yet somehow understood. She looked down at her notes and froze. In the margins, without realizing it, she had been absently sketching that same script. The last thing Nexus 9 had said echoed in her mind. Humans truly are remarkable. Dr. Chen. Not many species could preserve such comprehensive historical records while completely believing they were works of fiction. Sarah felt a strange tingling sensation in her hands as she stared at the alien script she had drawn. For a moment, just a moment, the symbols seemed to glow. 3 weeks after the cultural exchange, Sarah's comm unit lit up with an urgent message. The crystalline text pulsed with anxiety. Unusual for the typically composed Galactic Council communications, it was from 6427. Dr. Chen. Meet immediately. Laboratory Level 3, Station Omega. Security breach implications. Bring entertainment records. Sarah hesitated. Unauthorized meetings with council members were strictly forbidden during the evaluation period, but something in the message's urgency compelled her to go. She grabbed her tablet containing the entertainment database and headed for the orbital station. She found 6427 in a dimly lit lab, their crystalline form barely illuminated. Holographic displays surrounded them, showing streams of genetic data alongside scenes from human media. Dr. Chen. 6427's voice wavered. I've broken numerous protocols by contacting you, but you need to see this. They gestured to the nearest display. These are genetic markers we collected during the cultural exchange. Watch. The display showed a complex DNA sequence. Alongside it played a scene from an ancient Greek myth, Hercules lifting a mountain. As the scene played, specific sections of the DNA lit up in patterns. I don't understand, Sarah said. What am I looking at? These are dormant gene sequences in human DNA. Watch what happens when we compare them to your entertainment media. 6427 overlaid the genetic data with scenes from superhero movies, ancient myths, and folk tales. The correlations were perfect. Each display of supernatural ability in the stories matched exactly with specific genetic markers. That's impossible, Sarah whispered. These are just stories. Are they? 6427's form pulsed rapidly. Dr. Chen, these genetic markers, they're real. They exist in every human we sampled, but they're dormant, like locked doors waiting for the right key. Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled up her childhood story about the star speaker. What about this one? 6427 analyzed it quickly. Their form suddenly blazed with light. Dr. Chen, this sequence, it's active in your DNA. The room seemed to spin. Sarah grabbed the edge of a console for support. What are you saying? The council suspected something when we first saw your entertainment database. The specificity was too perfect. These weren't just stories. They were instruction manuals, passed down through generations. Your entire entertainment industry, your whole storytelling tradition, it's all been preserving genetic memory. A door hissed open behind them. Nexus 9 stood there, flanked by Council's security drones. Archivist 6427, you have violated Council Directive 7749. Step away from the human. But 6427 didn't move. Instead, they quickly transferred a data packet to Sarah's tablet. The Council wants to suppress this knowledge. They're afraid. But you need to know, those dreams you had about speaking to stars, they weren't dreams. They were memories. The security drones moved forward. Sarah clutched her tablet, her mind racing. Every story she'd ever loved, every fictional tale she'd grown up with, were they all real? Dr. Chen, Nexus 9's voice was cold. You will surrender your device and forget this meeting occurred. The Council has determined that humanity is not ready for this information. Sarah felt something stir inside her, like a word on the tip of her tongue. The same sensation she used to get in those dreams about the stars. Without thinking, she looked up at the ceiling, and whispered something in a language she'd never learned. The station's lights flickered. Everyone in the room froze. Nexus 9's crystalline form dimmed dramatically. Impossible. That language was lost 50,000 years ago. Was it? Sarah found herself smiling. Or did we just hide it in plain sight, disguised as fantasy? The security drones moved closer, but Sarah kept speaking in that impossible language. With each word, more lights flickered, and she felt something awakening inside her, something that had always been there, waiting. Zix 427's final words rang in her mind as the drones reached for her. Every story your people ever told, every power you imagined. They're all real, Dr. Chen. You just needed to remember. And as the drones touched her arms, Sarah felt the stars above the station singing back to her, just like in her dreams. Only this time, she understood exactly what they were saying. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the first chapter of a very old one, finally being read again. The genetic message was beautiful in its complexity, a double helix that spiraled into readable patterns when viewed from the right angle. Sarah sat in her makeshift lab aboard the rogue science vessel Prometheus, watching as Zix 427's decoding algorithms worked their magic. They'd been on the run for 2 weeks since escaping Station Omega. The Council's suppression fleet had nearly caught them twice. But each time, Sarah had spoken to the stars in that ancient language, and somehow they'd slipped away. The encoding is unlike anything we've seen, Zix 427 said, their crystalline form glowing with excitement. It's not just data. It's a living memory, written into the very fabric of human DNA. As they watched, the decoded message began forming on the holographic display. But it wasn't just text, it was showing them images, scenes from Earth's past that no historian had ever documented. A civilization that touched the stars, cities that floated in the sky, humans who could reshape matter with a thought. And something more, a war that spanned galaxies. This is impossible, Sarah whispered, but she knew it wasn't. She'd been doing impossible things since that day in the lab. Our whole history, everything we thought we knew. An alert flashed on the ship's console. Ancient defense systems, dormant for millennia, were activating across the galaxy. They were responding to human genetic signatures, responding to the children of their creators. Look at this, Zix 427 highlighted a sequence of genetic code. Your people didn't just hide their abilities. They encoded the entire reason why. The war, the enemy, the decision to forget. It's all here. The message continued unfolding, showing them the truth. Humanity had been losing the war against an enemy that could predict their every move, that knew their every capability. So they did the one thing their enemy couldn't predict. They chose to forget everything. They locked away their powers in their genes and hid the keys in stories. The Council knows, Sarah realized. That's why they're so desperate to suppress this. They're afraid of what humanity will become when we remember. A new alert sounded. Proximity warnings. Council ships had found them. But Sarah wasn't afraid anymore. In the 2 weeks since her awakening, she'd begun remembering more than just the star language. Every fictional story she'd ever read was taking on new meaning, revealing itself as a carefully preserved memory. They're hailing us, Zix 427 announced. The holographic display showed Nexus 9's stern crystalline form. Dr. Chen, you've accessed forbidden knowledge. Stand down and prepare for memory suppression. Sarah smiled. You can't suppress what's already awakening. She turned to the genetic display. Look at these patterns. Every human entertainment franchise, every myth, every legend. They're all showing the same genetic markers activating. The stories are doing exactly what they were designed to do. You don't understand the forces you're dealing with, Nexus 9 warned. No, Sarah corrected. You don't understand what humanity did. We didn't just hide our abilities. We turned our suppression into a weapon. Every time you tried to make us forget, we turned those memories into entertainment, into stories that would preserve everything we were, hidden in plain sight. As if in response to her words, the genetic message reached its conclusion. The final sequence showed a date. Today's date, 50,000 years after humanity's greatest gambit began. It was all planned. Sarah breathed. Even this moment, we knew that one day we'd need to remember everything. And now, the ship's sensors lit up with new readings. All across Earth, people were reporting strange dreams. Children were doing impossible things. And in libraries, bookstores, and entertainment centers around the world, stories that had been dismissed as fiction were revealing their true nature. Humanity's greatest weapon had never been their power. It had been their ability to hide that power in plain sight, preserved in the one thing their enemies would never think to fear, their stories. And now, those stories were waking up. The incident was broadcast live across every galactic frequency. Later, historians would mark it as the moment everything changed, when fiction and reality collided in front of an audience of trillions. It started with a child. 6-year-old Maya Chen had been visiting her Aunt Sarah at the newly established Earth Embassy when the security drone malfunctioned. The council would later claim it was an accident, but Sarah knew better. They had been trying to capture her niece, to study her awakening genetic markers. The drone had cornered Maya in the embassy's atrium, its restraint fields powering up. The girl's mother screamed from behind the security barrier, unable to reach her daughter. But Maya didn't cry. Instead, she raised her hands just like her favorite cartoon character did when facing danger. And just like in the cartoon, a shimmering energy shield materialized around her. The drone crashed against the barrier, its restraint fields dissolving harmlessly against Maya's protection. The child stood there, eyes wide with wonder rather than fear, as if she'd always known she could do this. The footage spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communications. A human child manifesting abilities that matched their entertainment programs exactly. The council couldn't suppress this. Too many had seen it. "It's happening faster than we predicted," Zix 427 said, analyzing the data in their hidden laboratory. "The stories are triggering genetic memories at an exponential rate." Sarah watched the streams of incoming reports. Children levitating toys, like in the movies. Teenagers discovering they could communicate telepathically, just like in their favorite shows. Each manifestation perfectly matched a piece of human entertainment media. But not everyone was celebrating. Across the galaxy, panic spread among species who had dismissed humans as primitive storytellers. Some called for immediate quarantine of Earth. Others demanded more drastic measures. The collective of rigid minds has already dispatched hunter ships, Zix 427 reported. They're claiming humans are too dangerous to exist. The mechanical Concordat is debating whether to sterilize Earth's entire solar system. Sarah barely heard them. She was too focused on the memories flooding her consciousness. Memories of a war that hadn't happened in her lifetime, but somehow felt as real as yesterday. She remembered commanding starships, wielding powers that dwarfed Maya's shield, fighting enemies that... Her eyes snapped open. "They're coming back, aren't they? The ones we were fighting. The ones we chose to forget." Yes, Zix 427's crystalline form dimmed. The Council's oldest records speak of them. They're the reason the Council exists, to prevent their return. But now, an alert flashed. More children were manifesting abilities. Adults were reporting strange dreams, unconscious knowledge of technologies that shouldn't exist. And in orbit, Earth's ancient defense systems, disguised for millennia as defunct satellites, were coming online. Sarah closed her eyes, reaching out with senses she was only beginning to remember she had. The stars sang to her of movement in the dark spaces between galaxies. Something old was stirring, awakened by humanity's remembering. "We need to protect the children," she said. "They're remembering faster than adults. Their minds aren't cluttered with artificial limitations. We need to gather them somewhere safe." "The Council won't allow it," Zix 427 warned. Sarah smiled grimly. The Council just witnessed a 6-year-old generate an energy shield that their best scientists can't explain. I don't think they're in a position to allow or disallow anything anymore." She pulled up the Galactic news feeds. Every channel showed the same things. Humans discovering abilities that matched their fictional entertainment perfectly. The galaxy was watching in terror as an entire species remembered what they truly were. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, ancient enemies were watching too, realizing that their greatest fear had come true. The stories they had dismissed as human imagination had preserved exactly what they had tried to erase. The game of pretend was over. The time for remembering had begun. The attack on Earth's embassy was meant to be a surgical strike, a desperate attempt by the Council's hardliners to contain what they saw as an exponentially growing threat. Instead, it became the catalyst that shattered 50,000 years of carefully constructed amnesia. Sarah stood in the embassy's grand hall as the assault teams breached the perimeter. Behind her, 30 children, including her niece Maya, huddled together, their newly awakened abilities flickering like newborn stars. "Remember the stories," Sarah told them calmly, even as the attackers approached. "Every tale you've ever loved. They weren't teaching you fiction. They were teaching you who you are." The first wave of Council forces burst through the doors, weapons charged, but Sarah was no longer afraid. The ancient language flowed from her lips like a song, each word resonating with the very fabric of space-time. The galaxy watched through countless feeds as Sarah Chen, previously known only as a xenolinguist, demonstrated powers that matched legends written millennia ago. Force fields materialized and dissolved. Energy coursed through the air in patterns that matched ancient cave paintings. The attackers found their weapons transformed into harmless light. "Impossible," the Council commander broadcast. "These abilities were erased from the universe." Sarah's response was transmitted to every corner of the galaxy. "You can't erase what's written in our very souls. You can only make us forget for a while." Across Earth, more humans began to wake. A firefighter in Beijing suddenly understood why she'd always loved stories about controlling flames. Because she could. A teacher in Lagos discovered why tales of telepathy resonated so deeply. Because they were his heritage. Every human fiction was revealing itself as carefully preserved truth. In orbit, Zix 427 monitored the cascading awakenings. "The genetic triggers are activating in sequence," they reported to Sarah through their secure channel. "Each manifestation perfectly matches a piece of human entertainment media." The stories weren't just preserving memories. They were creating a carefully orchestrated activation sequence. Sarah watched as Maya and the other children began moving in perfect synchronization, their abilities harmonizing in ways that matched scenes from countless movies and books. "We didn't just hide our powers in stories," she realized. "We turned our entire entertainment industry into a training program. Every book, every movie, every game. They were all preparing us for this moment." The Council forces retreated, but Sarah knew this was just the beginning. In the darkness between stars, ancient sensors were detecting movement. Their old enemy, the one they had chosen to forget rather than face unprepared, was stirring. "Dr. Chen," Nexus 9's transmission carried a note of fear. "You don't understand what you're awakening. The powers you're remembering. They're beyond anything the modern galaxy can contain." Sarah thought of every story humanity had ever told. Every myth, every legend, every tale of heroes and gods and impossible feats. All of them true. All of them waiting to be remembered. "You're right," she responded. "These powers are beyond containing. They always were. That's why we didn't try to contain them. We transformed them into something beautiful. Something that could pass right through every barrier you created." She looked at the children, each one glowing with newly awakened power. In their eyes, she saw the same wonder she had felt when reading stories as a child. But now she understood. That wonder hadn't been imagination. It had been recognition. "We turned our greatest weapons into bedtime stories," Sarah broadcast to the galaxy. "We hid our most powerful technologies in summer blockbusters. We preserved our entire civilization in tales we told our children. And now we're remembering what those stories really mean. Above Earth, the stars began to sing, and this time, everyone could hear them. They emerged from the spaces between galaxies, ships that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their design matched perfectly with descriptions from science fiction novels written centuries ago. Humanity's imagined enemies had finally revealed themselves as terrifyingly real. Kai's first transmission was broadcast across all frequencies, in a language that humanity had supposedly never heard before. Yet millions of humans understood it instantly. They'd been reading it in alien language scenes in movies and TV shows their entire lives. The seal has broken, the Kai commander's voice resonated with ancient malice. The lost ones remember. The great deception ends. Sarah stood in Earth's new defense command, established in what had once been a film studio. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity's entertainment centers had always been their true military installations, hidden in plain sight. They engineered our downfall, she explained to the hastily assembled Earth Council. 50,000 years ago, they found a way to suppress our abilities, to make us forget who we were. But they made one crucial mistake. On the screens around them, scenes from human fiction played alongside the approaching Kai fleet. The similarities were exact, from the ship designs to their energy signatures. They thought forcing us to forget would destroy us. Sarah continued. Instead, we turned that forgetting into our greatest weapon. Every time they made us forget, we turned those memories into stories, into entertainment, into art. Zix 427's hologram flickered beside her. The Galactic Council's oldest records make sense now. They weren't created to unite the galaxy. They were established by the Nth Kai to monitor humanity, to ensure you never remembered. The Nth Kai ships entered the solar system, their formation matching battle scenarios from a popular space combat video game series, a game that millions of humans had played obsessively, unknowingly practicing for this very moment. Look at their approach vector, a young lieutenant said, pointing to the tactical display. It's exactly like the final level of Star Crusader VI. Sarah smiled. That's because Star Crusader wasn't just a game. It was a memory of how we fought them last time. Around Earth, humans were discovering that their fictional knowledge was actually tactical data, preserved through entertainment. Military strategists who had studied fantasy battles found themselves remembering actual combat techniques. Engineers who had dreamed of designing impossible technologies suddenly understood exactly how they worked. Then the Kai commander's voice boomed again. You cannot hope to resist. Your civilization is barely past primitive spaceflight. Your weapons are toys. In response, Sarah broadcast across all frequencies, speaking in that ancient language that every human now remembered. You're wrong. We're not primitive. We're prepared. Every story we told, every game we played, every piece of entertainment we created, they were all preparation for your return. She turned to the Earth Council. For 50,000 years, they watched us tell stories about impossible things. They laughed at our imagination, never realizing we were preserving our greatest weapons in a form they couldn't recognize as dangerous. The Nth Kai fleet moved closer, their weapons charging. But across Earth, humans were remembering. Every superhero movie became a combat manual. Every science fiction novel revealed itself as technical specifications. Every fantasy tale showed itself as a guide to powers that had always been real. You hid the truth from us, Sarah broadcast to the Nth Kai. But you never understood humanity's greatest strength. We didn't just preserve our knowledge, we evolved it. We turned our history into entertainment and spent 50,000 years improving it, making it stronger, more creative, more powerful. The stars sang with ancient power as humanity remembered not just what they had been, but what they had become while pretending to be less than they were. The real war was about to begin. And this time, humanity was more than ready. Every screen on Earth activated simultaneously. Televisions, computers, phones, billboards. They all began playing humanity's entertainment media in perfect synchronization. But now, the fiction was revealing itself as instruction. In New York, a group of teenagers watching their favorite superhero movie suddenly understood the precise genetic sequences needed to manipulate energy fields. In Tokyo, a gaming tournament transformed into a tactical command center as players realized their favorite RTS games were actually military simulations. Sarah stood in the center of it all. Her consciousness expanded beyond normal human limits, connected to the awakening power of billions. "It's beautiful," she whispered to Zix 427. "We didn't just preserve our abilities. We turned our entire culture into one massive training program." Around her, the former film studio had become a war room. The prop computers were revealing themselves as advanced tactical systems. The costume department contained battle armor that had been disguised as fantasy wear. Every piece of entertainment infrastructure was transforming into its true form. "The Nth Kai are approaching weapons range," an operator announced, her hands moving across controls that perfectly matched her favorite space combat game's interface. "Their patterns match episode 47 of Star Warriors exactly." "Of course they do," Sarah replied. "Because that episode wasn't fiction. It was a memory of how they attacked last time. And now we remember how to counter it." Across the planet, humans were instinctively accessing abilities they had practiced through entertainment their entire lives. Children who had played at being wizards found they could actually manipulate energy fields. Fans who had memorized technobabble discovered they were reciting actual scientific principles. The Nth Kai's first attack came exactly as 1,000 science fiction stories had predicted. But this time, humanity was ready. "Defense grid activated," called out another operator, just like in Planetary Shield. Exactly like in the game. Sarah watched as Earth's defensive systems, disguised for millennia as satellites, radio towers, and entertainment transmitters, revealed their true nature. The planet's atmosphere shimmered with energy patterns that matched scenes from countless movies. "They never understood," she said to Zix 427. "When they forced us to forget, we turned our memories into entertainment. But we didn't just preserve them. We spent 50,000 years refining them, improving them, making them stronger through the power of human creativity." The Nth Kai fleet launched their main assault, dark energy weapons powering up. But across Earth, millions of humans who had spent their lives consuming fiction found they knew exactly what to do. Video gamers became tactical commanders, their thousands of hours of play revealing themselves as combat training. Science fiction authors discovered their imagined technologies were blueprints for real devices. Fantasy lovers realized their beloved spells were actual energy manipulation techniques. "We didn't just hide our powers in stories," Sarah broadcast to the awakening planet. "We turned our entire entertainment industry into the most elaborate training program ever created. Every book you read, every movie you watched, every game you played, they were all preparing you for this moment." The Nth Kai commander's voice boomed across space. "Impossible. You were suppressed, reduced to primitive storytellers." Sarah laughed. "That was your mistake. You never understood that for humanity, stories aren't just entertainment. They're how we preserve truth, how we pass on knowledge, how we prepare for the future." Around Earth, the entertainment-turned defense systems hummed with power. Billions of humans, trained since childhood through fiction, stood ready to defend their world. "And now," Sarah declared, "we're going to show you exactly what 50,000 years of storytelling has taught us." The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as humanity prepared to demonstrate that their greatest stories had never been fiction at all. The final battle began not with weapons, but with a story. As the Nth Kai fleet positioned themselves for their killing blow, Sarah Chen stood before humanity's combined consciousness and told the truth that had been hidden in fiction for 50,000 years. Once, she began, her voice carried to every human mind. "We were more than we are now. But we faced an enemy who could predict our every move, who knew our every capability. So we did the one thing they could never predict. We chose to forget everything. The nth Kai weapons powered up, dark energy crackling across their hull. But Sarah continued, each word awakening more of humanity's sleeping potential. We locked away our powers in our genes and hid the keys in stories, in entertainment, in art. We turned our greatest weapons into fairy tales and our most advanced science into summer blockbusters. And while our enemies watched us tell these fictional stories, we were actually spending 50,000 years improving our abilities through pure imagination. The first nth Kai blast struck Earth's shields that perfectly matched those shown in countless science fiction films. But instead of failing, they held, because humanity had spent decades watching those shields in movies, imagining how to make them better, stronger, more resilient. Across the planet, humans accessed abilities they had practiced their entire lives through entertainment. Every superhero fan who had dreamed of flying found they knew exactly how to manipulate gravity. Every science fiction enthusiast who had memorized made-up technologies discovered they were recalling actual scientific principles. You thought forcing us to forget would destroy us, Sarah broadcast to the nth Kai fleet. Instead, we turned that forgetting into our greatest weapon. We transformed our military training into entertainment, our combat techniques into games, our actual history into myths. The nth Kai commander's response carried genuine fear. This is impossible. You were reduced to primitive storytellers. No, Sarah corrected. We became something far more dangerous. We became dreamers. Every story we told made our powers stronger. Every movie we created improved our technology. Every game we played refined our tactics. We spent 50,000 years evolving while you thought we were just playing. Humanity's combined entertainment-turned defense systems activated. Weapons that had been disguised as television transmitters revealed their true nature. Ships that had been hidden as satellites emerged from Earth's orbit. And humans, trained since birth through fiction, took their positions with the confidence of veterans. The nth Kai launched their full assault, exactly as 1,000 science fiction stories had predicted. But this time, humanity didn't just remember how to fight back. They remembered how to win. You never understood. Sarah broadcast as Earth's combined forces engage. Stories aren't just entertainment for humans. They're how we preserve truth, how we pass on knowledge, how we prepare for the future. And now, she raised her hand, channeling power that matched every fictional display of energy manipulation ever shown in human media. Around the planet, billions of others did the same. Now we're going to show you why you should have been more afraid of our stories than our weapons. The battle that followed would be told in stories for generations to come. But this time, everyone would know those stories weren't fiction. They were history, preserved in the most human way possible. Through imagination, humanity had turned their greatest defeat into their ultimate victory. They had transformed their forced forgetting into an art form, their suppression into strength, their lost knowledge into entertainment that trained generations for this very moment. The galaxy watched in awe as humanity demonstrated that their greatest power had never been the abilities they possessed, but their capacity to preserve those abilities in a form their enemies thought was harmless, in the stories they told their children. And as the stars sang with ancient power, humanity proved once and for all that sometimes the most powerful weapons aren't the ones you wield. They're the tales you tell.